The docu-series has been criticised for allegedly using fake photos. The couple are also being criticised for publicising and profiting off their break from the royal family.
After years of speculation, controversy, and unanswered questions, Oprah Winfrey is finally breaking her silence on one of the most talked-about royal moments in recent history. Her latest comments are reigniting debates about Meghan Markle's wedding, with claims that challenge the narrative many believe to be true. As new details begin to surface, audiences are left questioning what really happened behind the scenes. So, was everything exactly as it appeared, or is there a deeper story waiting to be uncovered? But do you really believe Meghan and Harry could tell an obvious lie on a global TV interview? Let us know in the comments. To help us create more videos, please subscribe. The so-called secret wedding. During a widely watched and much discussed interview with Oprah Winfrey, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry shared a surprising detail about their marriage, one that immediately captured global attention. Meghan revealed that, days before their grand royal wedding in May 2018, the couple had already made a private commitment to each other in a quiet and deeply personal setting. According to Meghan, this earlier moment took place 3 days before the official ceremony that the world watched at Windsor Castle. She described it as a simple exchange of vows held in their backyard, far from cameras, crowds, and royal expectations. Present at this quiet moment, she claimed, was the Archbishop of Canterbury, who officiated what she portrayed as a meaningful and sacred union between the two of them. What made this account especially striking was the contrast it created. On one hand, there was the globally televised royal wedding, an event filled with tradition, spectacle, and millions of viewers. On the other hand, there was this intimate, almost hidden moment, described as something pure, personal, and untouched by public pressure. Meghan emphasized that while the world saw the official ceremony, the private exchange was the moment that truly mattered to them as a couple. In her words, it was just for us. This idea added a new emotional layer to their story. It suggested that beyond the formality and expectations of royal life, there was a desire for something simple and authentic, something that belonged only to them. For many listeners, this painted a picture of two individuals trying to protect a piece of their relationship from the overwhelming spotlight that constantly surrounded them. Prince Harry supported Meghan's account during the interview, reinforcing the narrative that their real connection and commitment were sealed away from public view. His agreement gave the story more weight, presenting a united front and strengthening the impression that this private moment held genuine importance in their journey together. At the same time, the revelation sparked curiosity and debate. People began to question how such a ceremony could take place outside the formal structures typically required for a legally recognized marriage, especially one involving members of the British royal family. The role of the Archbishop also drew attention, as many wondered about the nature and validity of what had been described. Still, beyond the questions and discussions it raised, the story itself was undeniably compelling. It touched on themes that many people can relate to: the desire for intimacy, the need to create meaningful moments away from public expectations, and the effort to hold on to something personal in a life that is constantly on display. In a world where public figures often live under intense scrutiny, this account offered a glimpse into a different side of their relationship. Whether seen as symbolic, emotional, or simply misunderstood, the idea of a secret wedding added depth to their narrative. It showed a couple trying to define their union on their own terms, even within the rigid structure of royal tradition. Ultimately, the story of this private exchange of vows became more than just a detail from an interview. It became a talking point, a mystery, and for some, a reflection of the complex balance between public duty and personal truth. How did the secret marriage sound to the most listeners? Was it true or a fake arrangement? Did Oprah accept it when the couple made the statement? Let's delve into the details of Oprah's submission on the couple's claim. Breaking her silence. After careful review and investigation, Oprah Winfrey and other observers pointed out that the official records and statements from experts do not support the idea that there was a secret legal wedding before the public ceremony of the couple. According to the official marriage certificate, the legally recognized wedding took place on May 19, 2018. This is the same date when the grand public ceremony was held at Windsor Castle, watched by millions across the world. This detail is important because, under English law, a marriage is not considered valid just because two people exchange vows privately or emotionally commit to each other. There are strict legal requirements that must be followed. The wedding must take place in an approved and licensed venue. It must include authorized witnesses, and it must be properly registered with the relevant authorities. Without these conditions, a marriage is not legally binding, no matter how sincere or emotional the private moment may be. Experts emphasized that these rules are not flexible or symbolic. They exist to make sure marriages are officially recorded and legally recognized. Based on these requirements, a casual or private exchange in a backyard or private setting would not qualify as a legal wedding under English law. Even if vows were exchanged in such a setting, it would still be considered informal and without legal effect. Further clarification came from Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was the person who officiated the public ceremony. His statement added more clarity to the discussion. He explained that the couple did not have any secret legal wedding before the official public event. According to him, while there may have been private meetings or informal moments shared with the couple before the wedding day, those moments were not part of any legal marriage process. He made it clear that only the public ceremony at Windsor Castle met the legal and official requirements needed for marriage. Any earlier interactions or private exchanges, even if meaning full or emotional, were not legally binding ceremonies. They would have been personal in nature rather than official acts of marriage. This explanation suggests that what one of the partners described as a private moment of vows may have been more of a personal or symbolic expression of love and commitment rather than a formal legal wedding. Many couples around the world choose to share private vows or intimate promises before or after their official wedding ceremony. These moments can feel deeply emotional and meaningful, but they do not replace the legal process required for marriage. However, the difference between the public narrative and the official legal records created confusion and debate. When public statements appear to suggest one version of events, but official documents show another, it naturally leads to questions and skepticism. People began to wonder whether there had been a misunderstanding in how the private moment was described, or whether it was simply a symbolic experience that was later interpreted differently. This gap between perception and documentation is what fueled much of the public criticism. For many observers, the idea of a secret wedding sounded dramatic and intriguing, but the legal evidence tells a more structured and straightforward story. It shows a single official wedding date, supported by formal registration and conducted under legal requirements. In the end, what remains clear from official accounts is that the couple's recognized marriage was the public ceremony held on May 19, 2018. Any earlier private exchange, if it occurred, was not a legal wedding, but rather a personal and private expression of commitment. The contrast between emotional storytelling and legal documentation is what turned a simple detail into a widely discussed topic. And so, the story continues to be discussed not just as a question of law, but also as an example of how personal memories, public statements, and official records can sometimes tell slightly different versions of the same moment in time. But why would the couple lie about having a secret wedding in the first place? What was the royal wedding like? Let's find out. A fairy tale beginning that captivated the world. On May 19, 2018, the world seemed to slow down for a moment. Across continents and time zones, millions of people turned their attention to one place, Windsor Castle in England. Something special was happening there. Meghan Markle was about to marry Prince Harry, and what unfolded that day was more than just a royal wedding. It felt like a moment stitched into global memory. From early morning, Windsor was already alive with excitement. Streets were filled with crowds hoping to catch even a small glimpse of the occasion. Flags waved, voices mixed with laughter, and the air carried a kind of energy that only major historical events seemed to bring. Inside the castle grounds, everything was prepared with careful detail, reflecting centuries of royal tradition. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Meghan Markle appeared, walking into a story that the world had been following closely for months. Her entrance was calm but powerful. Dressed in a simple yet elegant wedding gown, she moved forward with grace, step by step, toward Prince Harry. The moment felt almost unreal to many watching, like a scene from a film, except it was happening in real life. Sunlight touched the ancient stone walls of Windsor Castle, making them glow softly as if nature itself was part of the celebration. Cameras clicked without pause, capturing every angle, every expression, every tear, and every smile. Inside churches and living rooms, in cafes and public squares, people watched screens in silence or joy, fully absorbed in what they were seeing. To many, it looked like a perfect blend of two very different worlds. On one side stood the long, traditional history of the British monarchy, formal, structured, and deeply rooted in ceremony. On the other side was Meghan Markle, an American actress with a background in Hollywood, representing modern life, diversity, and change. Their union felt symbolic, like a bridge connecting the old and the new. For a large part of the public, it was a beautiful story of love. A prince choosing his partner not by tradition alone, but by personal connection. A woman from a different background stepping into one of the most watched families in the world. Many saw it as progress, a sign that times were changing and becoming more open. Even well-known figures watching from afar were moved by the occasion. Oprah Winfrey, among others, described the experience in deeply emotional terms. She spoke about how the moment felt larger than life, almost as if history itself had paused to witness something important. It was not just about two people getting married. It felt like a cultural turning point that the world would remember. Yet even with all its beauty and celebration, there was something less visible beneath the surface. It was not loud or obvious. It did not appear in photographs or broadcasts. Instead, it was a quiet feeling that some people sensed but could not fully explain at the time. Sometimes in moments that look perfect on the outside, deeper realities are already forming in the background. Expectations begin to build. Pressures begin to rise. Different worlds, no matter how beautifully joined, still carry their own histories, habits, and challenges. At the time, these things were not yet clear to the public eye. So while the world celebrated love, unity, and a new beginning, there was also the early trace of complexity, subtle, hidden, and waiting for time to reveal it. What seemed like a fairy tale moment was, in truth, also the beginning of a much longer and more complicated journey that few could fully see that day. What seemed quite awful during the wedding? Why did it look so weird? Let's dive into the details of the guest list that kept everyone talking. The guest list that raised quiet questions. Behind the beauty and grand display of the ceremony, there was also a quieter layer that many observers could not ignore. An undercurrent of tension, especially when attention turned to the guest list. On the surface, everything looked like a perfect royal celebration. Elegant design, global attention, and a carefully arranged ceremony watched by millions around the world. But beyond the flowers and formal smiles, some details sparked conversation and curiosity. In most royal weddings, the guest list tells a very human story. It reflects a lifetime of relationships. Childhood friends, schoolmates, neighbors, mentors, and family members who have shared the couple's journey long before fame or royal titles entered the picture. When Prince William married Catherine Middleton, the atmosphere inside the church reflected exactly that kind of personal history. The pews were filled with familiar faces, people who had known Catherine for years, long before she became part of the royal family. It felt grounded, personal, and deeply rooted in shared everyday life. However, Meghan Markle's guest list, as widely discussed in media reports and public commentary, appeared to tell a different kind of story. While her mother, Doria Ragland, was present and stood as a strong and central family figure, many members of her extended family were notably absent from the ceremony. In their place, the seating arrangement included a number of globally recognized public figures from entertainment, media, and fashion. Names such as George Clooney, Amal Clooney, Idris Elba, and Oprah Winfrey were widely mentioned among the high-profile attendees. Their presence immediately drew attention, not only because of their fame, but because of the nature of their connection to the couple. In traditional royal ceremonies, guests are usually long-term personal friends or close family acquaintances, people who have shared real, everyday moments with the couple over many years. This made the guest list feel, to some observers, more unusual and highly curated. Some media reports and conversations that followed the wedding even raised questions about how some of these celebrity guests were personally connected to the couple. In certain retellings of the event, it was suggested that not all of the high-profile attendees had long-standing personal relationships with the bride and groom before the wedding. In fact, there were claims circulating in commentary spaces that, at social moments surrounding the event, a simple question such as, "How do you know the couple?" reportedly received unexpected or indirect answers in some cases. Whether taken as fact, interpretation, or media narrative, this detail became a talking point. It led some observers to pause and reflect more deeply on what the gathering represented. Was it purely a traditional wedding guest list built on personal history and emotional closeness? Or was it something more layered, a modern royal event shaped also by symbolism, influence, and global visibility? For many watching from the outside, the presence of international celebrities added a different kind of energy to the occasion. It shifted the tone from a purely private family milestone to something that also carried the weight of global culture and public influence. The room, as described in various commentaries, was filled not only with witnesses to a union, but also with individuals who held significant public voices and media reach. This is where interpretation begins to diverge. Some saw it as a natural reflection of Meghan Markle's career in entertainment and humanitarian circles, where professional relationships often blend with personal friendships. Others viewed it as an intentional and carefully shaped guest list that reflected image, reach, and modern influence alongside tradition. In the end, the guest list became more than just a list of names. It became part of a broader conversation about how modern royal weddings are evolving. No longer are they seen only as private unions between two individuals and their close circles. They are also global events, watched, analyzed, and interpreted by millions, where every detail, from the dress to the seating arrangement, can carry meaning far beyond the ceremony itself. And so, behind the beauty, celebration, and historic significance of the day, the guest list quietly remained one of the most discussed elements, offering a glimpse into how tradition and modern celebrity culture can sometimes blend and sometimes collide on the world's biggest stages. Did the guests share a relationship with the couple? Why were some important members of Meghan's family absent? Let's dig further into the details of the guest list and their relationship with Meghan. Oprah, influence, and the shift in perception. Few public personalities have influenced global storytelling the way Oprah Winfrey has. For decades, she has been known not just as a talk show host, but as a voice people trust when it comes to emotional truth, human stories, and personal confession. So when she became connected to the public narrative around Meghan Markle and the British royal family story, attention naturally followed every word, every appearance, and every silence. At first, the relationship in the public eye seemed clear. Oprah appeared supportive of the couple's story, especially around their wedding and their journey into royal life. Her tone during public discussions, and later during the widely watched 2021 interview with Meghan and Prince Harry, gave the impression of alignment. The interview itself became a global moment, discussed everywhere, analyzed deeply, and remembered as one of the most influential media conversations of that year. In that moment, Oprah was not just an interviewer. She was seen as someone helping to bring hidden emotions and personal experiences into the open. But after the intensity of that global attention faded, something subtle but noticeable began to shift. Oprah became increasingly quiet about Meghan in public spaces. There were no continued statements reinforcing the earlier narrative, no new interviews expanding on the topic, and no visible public defense or commentary when debates around the interview resurfaced online. For a figure whose influence is strongly tied to communication and visibility, this silence stood out. In media culture, silence from a voice as powerful as Oprah's is rarely ignored. It is often interpreted, questioned, and analyzed. Observers began to wonder what this distance meant. Was it a natural step back after a major media moment, or was it a sign of something deeper? perhaps a reassessment of what had been shared publicly. Part of the discussion that followed centered on evolving details in the broader royal wedding narrative. One key point that drew attention was a claim involving a private or earlier wedding ceremony before the official public wedding. This detail, which circulated in interviews and commentary, was later clarified by Justin Welby, who explained the nature of the official ceremony in relation to legal and public recognition. That clarification became part of a wider conversation about what was meant, what was said emotionally, and what was legally or officially accurate. Although the issue itself may appear technical, in the world of public storytelling, it carried emotional weight. When narratives are built on personal testimony, even small differences in wording or interpretation can shift how audiences perceive the entire story. And when those perceptions shift, they do not remain isolated. They extend to everyone connected to the conversation, including the interviewer. For Oprah, whose career has been built on carefully guiding conversations that center truth, vulnerability, and credibility, such moments are particularly sensitive. Her public identity has always rested on a foundation of trust. Audiences believe her interviews reveal something real, something meaningful, something worth holding on to. Because of that, any controversy or confusion surrounding a major interview naturally reflects back on her role in it. Over time, the energy around the interview slowly changed. What began as a unified moment of storytelling gradually became a subject of debate, interpretation, and media comparison. And in that shifting atmosphere, Oprah's public silence became even more noticeable. Rather than continuing to engage in the ongoing discussions, she stepped back into a quieter position, allowing the conversation to evolve without her active participation. To some, this looked like professional distance, a natural move after a high-impact interview. To others, it suggested caution, reflection, or even a subtle re-evaluation of how the story had unfolded in the public space. What is clear is that the once visible alignment between Oprah and Meghan in the public narrative did not continue in the same way after the initial wave of attention. Instead, it softened, faded from active discussion, and transitioned into silence and separation. And in the world of media, where attention is constant and silence is rare, that shift often says as much as words ever could. Could Meghan's choice of guests at her wedding be for political reasons? What kind of relationship does she share with most of the guests today? Let's find out. From power circle to quiet distance. In the years that followed, something subtle but very noticeable began to happen around Meghan's once very visible circle of influence. At the time of the royal wedding at Windsor, it looked like she had stepped into a world filled with strong connections, powerful friends, and well-known names from entertainment, business, and society. Cameras captured smiles, handshakes, and warm moments. It seemed like a bridge had been built between two worlds, royalty and Hollywood, held together by admiration, curiosity, and global attention. But as time moved on, that circle did not remain as bright or as close as it once appeared. Bit by bit, the presence of many high-profile figures who were once seen around that early royal moment began to fade. The same familiar faces that once filled seats at Windsor or were openly linked to the excitement surrounding the union became less visible in her day-to-day public world. There were fewer shared appearances, fewer public messages of support, and fewer moments where those connections were clearly on display. In places like Hollywood, distance is not always loud or dramatic. It rarely comes with public statements or open conflict. Instead, it often happens quietly, almost without notice. Invitations become less frequent. Projects that once seemed possible together do not move forward. Public appearances no longer overlap as much. The bond does not break in a sudden moment. It slowly loosens over time, like a thread gently unwinding. As this shift continued, observers also noticed how some well-known personalities, who were once seen as part of that wider circle, began to appear more connected to traditional institutions again, including the royal family itself. For example, figures such as George Clooney were seen at events or engagements linked to King Charles III, reflecting how relationships in these high social spaces often evolve and reposition themselves over time. These changes were not loud announcements, but quiet signals that the social map had started to redraw itself. What once looked like a wide and powerful network of support began to feel less connected than before. The energy around it changed. The early excitement that surrounded the blending of celebrity culture and royal tradition slowly gave way to distance, separate paths, and different priorities. In many ways, the circle did not collapse. It simply spread out, with each person or group moving in directions that suited their own long-term interests, values, or responsibilities. This kind of shift is not unusual in worlds driven by fame, influence, and public attention. Relationships in these spaces can be strong, but they are also sensitive to time, pressure, and changing circumstances. When the shared moment that brought people together fades, what remains is often tested by distance and silence. In the end, this unfolding story leaves behind a deeper reflection that goes beyond any one person or event. It highlights an important truth about influence and human connection. Building a network through strategy, timing, and visibility can open doors and create powerful moments. It can bring people together in impressive ways and shape how the world sees a particular story. But strategy alone is rarely enough to keep those connections alive for the long run. Real connection, whether in royal spaces, Hollywood circles, or any part of life, needs something more stable. It needs trust that does not depend on attention. It needs consistency that remains even when the cameras are gone. And most importantly, it needs authenticity, the kind that is not performed for the public but lived quietly behind the scenes. Without these deeper foundations, even the brightest moments can slowly lose their shape over time. The royal wedding at Windsor still remains in public memory as a moment filled with beauty, elegance, and global attention. For many, it represented hope, unity, and a new chapter that blended tradition with modern fame. It was a day the world watched closely, and one that left a lasting visual impression. Yet as the years have passed, that same moment is now often viewed in a more layered way. It is remembered not only as a celebration of love, but also as a reflection of how perception is built, how ambition moves, and how carefully constructed images can sometimes differ from long-term reality. In the end, the story becomes more than just a royal wedding. It becomes a quiet lesson about human relationships in the public eye, how they are formed, how they grow, and how they sometimes drift apart when the forces that created them begin to change. So, what do you think about Meghan and Harry's secret marriage? What could be their motive behind the lie? We'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.